I too have 4 children, 8, 7, 5, and 1. And by about the 12th time I had done the dive in front of the television like a Secret Service agent taking a bullet, I thought, something's wrong here. It's not just how it was in the old days where you're like, I don't like the way that character speaks to their parents, or I don't like the way that character, that father is portrayed. Suddenly it had gotten extreme. And even folks on the left are saying, this is not age appropriate. These are the single most controversial issues that we're facing today. And now you're forcing me to have a conversation about it with my 5-year-old in the minivan on the way home from the movies.
Not at a time when you have decided as
Precisely.
Dad, which is just so despicable.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Kevin Roberts Show. It is so great, believe it or not, to be in the People's Republic of California this week. And I think one of the reasons I'm excited about being here is not just because it's a short-term stay, but also because I am sitting with one of my more recent great friends, someone I met in my last day in Austin, Texas. Christian McGuigan is the CEO of Sycamore Studios. He's an all-around great guy, as you're about to hear or see, and you're also going to be really inspired, because if you're like me, as a father of 4, and someone deeply worried about American culture, and as an unabashed conservative, I worry that maybe we haven't paid attention to all of the industries that we should have over the last few decades. And my friend Christian has the answer for that. It's great to see you.
There's no pressure. It's great to see you as well, Kevin.
Yeah, that's quite a build-up.
Yeah,
right?
that's the answer. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the reasons I have great confidence in what you're doing, in addition to getting to know you, is that you're a University of Dallas graduate.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, and there are only a few University of Dallas graduates who are disappointing.
That's true. That's true as well. Yeah.
Were they in
only
your
a few.
class?
I had 4 roommates, so I guess few is 4. Yeah. So.
All kidding aside, thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. We're going to get into what Sycamore Studios does in great detail. But first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. That is to say, how is it that this guy who's very right-minded is in the entertainment industry, in the movie-making business, and is smiling? As the president of the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's quite a bio, right? But I think I come by it honestly in that my father, who grew up in North Hollywood, California, when he would come home from college, he would work at the movie studios. So he worked on Planet of the Apes and Dr. Dolittle and you name it. And then my mother was a Catholic radio show host. So she was a radio show host for 25 years in EWTN. And so I would oftentimes be getting ready for school or running an errand and hear my mother on the radio. And then my father was in sales, and I would hear him on a sales call. And so it always became very naturally this idea of storytelling and the way in which we use story to really impact culture. Andrew Stanton, who's one of the most famous Pixar directors, he always said, if you want someone to know the truth, tell them. If you want them to love the truth, tell them a story. And I'm also a devout Roman Catholic, and I think Jesus Christ is the best storyteller of all. So my life has always been sort of imbued with storytelling. And so the idea of actually using storytelling, not only for economic purposes, but also to move culture, always really, really appealed to me. And so growing up in Southern California, I was always very close in and out of the industry. I was an actor for a bit, but I didn't love it. I wasn't willing to work at the Cheesecake Factory for a decade to go on soap opera auditions. I just didn't love it. I'd written a few screenplays that were optioned, but I just didn't love it. But the idea of actually taking a step back and becoming a producer and having an opportunity to sort of play the orchestra and move that forward really appealed to me. And so I went to work for a company called Participant Media, which was founded by Jeff Skoll. And his idea was, he was the first president of eBay. His idea was, how can we create a storytelling apparatus that makes money at the box office, but also has an opportunity to move culture in a certain direction? And they had a lot of success. I mean, I think over a 20-year period, about $3.5 billion at the box office, a bunch of Academy Awards. Now, I wasn't fully aligned with always where that culture was moving. And there came a time where I had to say, hey, in good conscience, I can't work on this project. And I was fortunate enough at the time where they respected that, and I had reached a level of experience in the company. Now, would that happen now? I'm not sure. But it was a unique moment in time. So I was always just learning, what are the ways in which we do this? And then when the opportunity arose, where there was an opportunity to really partner with elite values-aligned talent who sees an opportunity, and in our particular case, sees an opportunity in the kids and family space, we were going to take it. It was everything, all roads have sort of led to that opportunity.
So tell us about Sycamore. What is in a more detailed way, perhaps, the problem you're trying to address?
So if you want to make money in Hollywood, there's really two genres you should be working in. One is horror films, which you can make very, very cheap and have massive appeal. I don't like horror films, right? I don't care for horror films. And the other is kids and family entertainment. And why is that? Is it has universal appeal and it has uncapped potential. You have a successful kids property, it's not just, wow, we made a good movie and everybody, great job. It's then you get into merchandising and live shows and gaming, and you can really create an entire universe around that. And so that was always an opportunity for us. And then I too have 4 children, 8, 7, 5, and 1. And by about the 12th time I had done the dive in front of the television like a Secret Service agent taking a bullet, I thought, something's wrong here. It's not just how it was in the old days where you're like, I don't like the way that character speaks to their parents, or I don't like the way that that father is portrayed. Suddenly it had gotten extreme. And even folks on the left are saying, this is not age appropriate. These are the single most controversial issues that we're facing today. And now you're forcing me to have a conversation about it with my 5-year-old in the minivan on the way home from the movies.
Not at a time when you have decided as
precisely
dad, which is just so despicable.
Yeah, they're literally forcing the conversation, and a lot of parents aren't even prepared to have these conversations. And the way I thought about it, I said, if you're not willing to have a conversation on an airplane with a stranger about this topic, right? If that's going to be a little too uncomfortable for you, maybe it shouldn't be in preschool content. And so that kept happening. We saw it really peak during the pandemic, and the question was, are audiences going to respond to this? And what we found was they did in a very big way. And so the Walt Disney Company, over the last 10 pictures they've released, they've lost about $4.5 billion. And audiences said, hey, listen, I love everything else you guys do, but when you do this, it's very easy for me to say I'm not taking my family to go see that film. And so that happened again and again, and that economic opportunity opened for us. So what we saw with Sycamore was the opportunity to say, what if there was a brand that was trusted by audiences, that had a values-based trust with audiences, but also made really high-quality content? That's something that folks in the conservative movement and maybe in the Christian movement, we have a lot of what we call mercy viewing, where you're like, I don't really want to watch it, but it's safe, so we'll leave it on. I get blowback from my kids on that. My 5-year-old says, Dad, I don't want to watch this, right? And so for us, we said there's an opportunity to become the most trusted brand in kids and family entertainment, trusted not just for the content. Safe content's great, but we want to make great content. We want to make good, true, and beautiful content. I come from a lineage of folks who painted the Sistine Chapel. When did we stop doing beautiful things? And if we can lead with beauty, then there's a real opportunity to tell these stories a unique way and reach families around the world.
In the political part or policy part of the conservative movement, just in the last 10 years, we have become aware, those of us who are not creatives like you, we've become aware of the need to tell stories. And in fact, when we first became friends, which was instantaneous, you were in the great town of Austin, it was over that you saw that, the power of storytelling as it relates to, say, what I do for a living, what we do at Heritage for a living. But it's more important than just storytelling. It's more important than just as it relates to policy and politics. It really speaks to who we are as humans.
Absolutely.
Every individual has a story. Every culture has a story. Every state has a story. One of them, Texas, has the best story, as we would agree.
Absolutely.
But even California has a good story. I'm told even West Virginia has a good story. That's for the producer, Mark, who's off camera. I'm not going to look at it right now, but he's such a good guy.
They're still developing that story.
Yeah. Actually, well, I'll come back to West Virginia, but they're going to lead the way in conservative policy reform, in part because they're going to tie it to the story of West Virginia.
Absolutely.
It's actually a really serious comment that leads up to this question, believe it or not, Christian. What would you say about what we, not just as conservatives, I want to talk about common sense people. Forget what ideological label people use. Just common sense Americans who understand we're not them. We're not the radical left. We're not the people who want to do all of these things that undermine the family. They undermine our ability as dads to parent our children. They undermine our ability to be prosperous as Americans. How can we use storytelling to take back our country?
Yeah, we have to tell better stories. So the best story generally wins, right? And then that's something that we have to improve upon. And we know there's historical precedent on that. And now we actually know there's scientific precedent on that. So the neuroplasticity that we read about, where we
neuroplasticity.
Can actually,
that's a $5 term.
It is. Yeah.
But please continue.
I'll grab the $5 on the way out. That neuroplasticity is how our brains change. how we actually evolve as human beings is we have that neural. You can reteach yourself, and you can teach yourself new things. And what we've actually found in laboratory settings, actually funded by DARPA of all folks, is that your brain, that neuroplasticity, will change on story. And so they did a number of scientific experiments, and what they found was when watching good story, not just any story, it can't be a boring story, it has to be something engaging, have to be something that really kind of grabs you by the heartstrings. What they found was elevated levels of what's called oxytocin. It's a neurochemical. The highest content of oxytocin any human being ever has is when a woman gives birth and has that initial skin-to-skin content.
Makes sense.
This is the bonding chemical. This is what connects us to other people. And so that happens in great storytelling, where we see it in even nonverbal ways, where if I see someone wearing a University of Dallas shirt, I trust them more than the person not wearing the University of Dallas shirt, because there's a narrative involved in that t-shirt, and there's a bond that actually takes place. And so what ends up happening is, in these laboratory settings, they're finding that individuals who are taking in this story are changed not just in that moment, but are changed well after the viewing. And as an example, you've probably seen movies where you've cried, and you know that this is not a real story. Or you've seen movies where the hair on the back of your neck stands up. You might be watching a James Bond movie. Like, why is that happening? This is fake. I know this is not real. I'm not taking part in the story, rather, but your brain doesn't know that. Your brain is actually saying, this is real, pay attention. We've evolved to a point to say, this might save your life someday, so pay attention. And so if we can harness that power and do it in a way, as I mentioned before, it has to be good storytelling. It can't be boring. It can't be just flatline storytelling. You have to be able to tell a narrative where there's something at stake. That's really when you're talking to a screenwriter. They say, what are the stakes? What are the stakes in the story? Why should I care about this story? And the only reason you're going to care about that character is if you have something in common. You can establish something, which as human beings, we can always find what that thing is. And then secondarily, there's stakes. There's something at risk here. So if the stakes here are the future of America, the future of the planet, the future of human beings, as it were, those are pretty big stakes. So if we can harness that, if we can make it real, whether it's voters in West Virginia or voters in California or Texans, native and otherwise, that's when we really have the power to not just move individuals, but move entire populations. And we know this happens with storytelling, and we've seen it happen with storytelling, and we've seen it happen historically with storytelling, with the way hearts and minds can change over time culturally because of the story that they take in.
It strikes me that your liberal arts background really came out in that response.
It did, very much.
We covered literally every academic discipline in that response. It's very impressive. I mean, I'm only being mildly
I was an English major, so
this is why you took so many words to explain.
This is true, yeah, and I'm Irish. So yeah, usually it's just one question, one answer, and then we can wrap it up.
I'm really just testing you to see if you're going to say, okay, I'm done with your mischief, Robert, so I'm just going to end this podcast. Thanks for tolerating me. This is why it's fun to have these conversations on the record in front of the camera with great friends. In all seriousness, it seems as if the applicability of what you said about storytelling, that frankly beautiful response about the science of it, the applicability is categorical. It's universal. We can do that not just at a sort of grand national level, say for a political campaign, which we don't need to talk about, but more importantly, we can do this individually. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. Often in my role as I travel the country, even this week, with a lot of heritage friends, I'm asked, Kevin, by just a regular person, what can I do to convince my neighbor, my friend, my child, my grandchild, that the country that I love so much, that's given so much to me, that I've fought for, maybe if they're a military veteran, to remember that. And it's really not data, even from the Heritage Foundation. Certainly not a white paper. It's a story. And it seems as if the basis of that is searching for the first level of commonality that two individuals have. And what I hear you saying is that still exists in the United States.
Very much so.
Otherwise, you couldn't have Sycamore Studios.
No. I mean, I like to say no one was ever bored into marching on Washington, right? No one was ever bored on their way to the polls. You have to stir something in those individuals. And we know as Americans, and we know as people of faith or otherwise, and people with families, listen, anybody can make any type of content. Disney's going to keep doing what they're doing, Illumination, Nickelodeon, they'll keep doing what they're doing. We're providing an alternative, and not in an alternative economy. We want to compete with them on their own grounds. And again, let the best story win. We'll hire the best writers, we work with the best directors, we have elite values-aligned teammates, We're going to do it, and let's see who wins, right? It's a trial by fire. You build yours, I'll build mine. Let's both stand on it, light it on fire, see who wins. That's what we're doing, and we're willing to actually risk that. And part of the reason we're able to risk that is because we've de-risked it in a way where we know the audience is there. I know my family and my 4 children, there is a dearth of opportunities at the theaters. There's a dearth of opportunities on streaming. And I love taking my kids to the movie theaters. It's an event, and they love going to the movies. And there's 52 weekends a year that need to be programmed, and not even the Walt Disney Company has the opportunity to program all those weekends. So when you start looking at it, and you think about it from an economic lens where you say, this is a good business opportunity. This is a fantastic business opportunity. And if it is, we can then layer in the cultural opportunity as well.
I love the aspiration that you mentioned explicitly, but it's inherent in everything you just said about the 52 weekends having program available that is good. And it isn't to sort of swerve into one question I was planning to ask you about the economics of your business, because I know the audience will be very interested in that. As much as I celebrate and try to participate in the parallel economy, the alternative economy, Heritage tries to give voice to that, perhaps even resources to it. The reality is we need people like you and entities like Sycamore Studios willing to have the confidence in what they're doing to say, I'm going to go toe-to-toe with Disney. I'm going to go toe-to-toe with the other competitors because this is America. And going back to what we just agreed on, which is that there's still enough commonality among Americans about the American story, we're confident that we're going to win. I mean, it's sort of this irrepressible optimism that right-minded people don't exude enough anymore.
And we don't need to turn the clock back to 1955.
Thank you for saying that.
From a storytelling perspective, I mean, 1955 was terrific, but from a storytelling perspective, we can just turn the clock back to 2019. This isn't completely revolutionary. This is just, here's some things that probably shouldn't be in kids' content, and here's the way we should tell stories that are good, true, and beautiful. I mean, the films that we have in development aren't like these, musings that I came up with in my bedroom one night. We're developing the first animated feature film about Dr. Dolittle. Dr. Dolittle has made over $800 million at the box office. It's skipped a couple generations, and I tell my children, I said, have you ever heard of Dr. Dolittle? And they're like, no, who's that? I said, he's a zoologist. They're like, oh, that's cool. And I said, he can talk to animals. They're like, Dad, why have you been holding this from us, right? So we know there's a market opportunity there. Born Free, a movie that came out in 1966 based on a true story about a family who adopts a lion and eventually has to reintroduce him in the wild. That has a ton of potential in the storytelling space. And again, to tell a story that's exciting and fun for kids, but also has a deeper meaning and a deeper layer that if we can really hit the bullseye, it's when parents feel something as well. But we don't push it to the nth degree like maybe Disney and Pixar has, where it's like, is this even a kids movie anymore? My kids don't enjoy it, and neither do I. I think we just completely missed the target. So those are the types of films that we're creating that is really for our core audience, and we know who that core audience is. A core audience who feel like they've been marginalized by the storytelling opportunities, that feel like not only are their values not being represented, that to take a term from folks on the left, it's not inclusive. It's not inclusive. A lot of the content that's being created is not inclusive of my family. And that's a problem, but it's also an opportunity. So that's what we're pushing forward, that it's not actually exclusive of the wider possible audience, which frankly, we're running a business. And our first priority is to serve our investors. People say, oh God, that sounds so transactional, or aren't you creating art? Listen, if we're serving our investors, that means we're serving our audience. And if we're serving our audience, the way in which we've constructed this company and the values that we hold as a business and as individuals, that means we're serving our mission. So it's not one or the other. It's not a zero-sum game.
It's a remarkable thing, right? That when a business CEO like you says, my first objective is to serve my investors, that's also a way of saying, I am going to be serving the common good, the public good. Mm-hmm. We lose sight of that, even on the political right in the United States, because we have such bad actors, mostly the Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies. I will say this, I think Disney's one of them, that people say because of their really bad decisions, they're foisting upon us agendas that we clearly disagree with. I mean, look at what they've lost, praise God.
Yeah.
We've participated in walking away from them as a family ourselves. But all of that to say, that creates opportunities for people like you and everyone associated with Sycamore Studios, not to say that you're going to be overtly political or ideological. You're just going to create a product that someone wants to consume. This is still America. It's not rocket science.
I mean, the bar, if you look at a movie like Super Mario Brothers, this came out last year, it made $1.35 billion at the box office. Now, was Super Mario Brothers a values-aligned film? No. Did my kids learn anything from Super Mario Brothers? Not at all. Did I take them and fall asleep in the theater? I absolutely did. but I was comfortable falling asleep because I knew, and it had been vouched for and co-signed by people I trust to say, it's just a safe movie. Remember when we used to make those types of kids movies where it's not the Chronicles of Narnia, where we're going to talk about it for a generation. It's just a safe kids movie. And you know what actually woke me up from my slumber was my children laughing. And it was just so heartening. And that movie made over $1 billion at the box office and was being released in the same window as some of these Disney films. Or Puss in Boots, which was released by DreamWorks, did $500 million at the box office. Just a beautiful, fun film for your family. And so we know the market opportunity is there, and we're going to seize upon it. And once we do that, we're able to, we talk about representation a lot in modern Hollywood. Well, representation actually works because it normalizes values and behaviors. And so the idea of actually normalizing a family in a loving relationship, a father who's intimately involved in his children's lives and loves his wife, the idea of going to a religious service on a regular basis. There's really one show in all of Hollywood that actually has characters that go to church on a fairly regular basis. Do you know what show it is, by any chance?
No.
The Simpsons.
Isn't that funny?
The only show that actually consistently you see a character that every once in a while goes to a church service of some kind. Now, why is that not normal? I go to church, you go to church, everybody I know goes to church or synagogue or whatever it might be, yet I can't find that represented in any of the content that we're watching. The only really a father character is on an Australian show called Bluey. That's an Australian healer animated dog, and that's the best parent that I can see. I mean, I've had opportunities. I was sleeping on the couch on a Sunday, and my 5-year-old woke me up, and I was fully defensive. I sleep a lot, apparently, around my children.
I've noticed this.
Yeah, and my 5-year-old wanted to play, and it could have been totally defensible to say, Dad's had a long week, I want to rest, and I literally thought to myself, what would Bluey's dad do? And I rolled off the couch and played. Now, Bluey's dad would have been like, great, we're going to play the game where I lay on the ground and you walk on my back. But I had this moment where I said, an Australian animated dog just made me, in that moment, a better father. And that's the only show where I've ever experienced that. So again, a tremendous market opportunity. How do we show little boys what real courage looks like? There's no shows that actually show that. We have an original show, a film called Dragon Watch. Now, the most popular, dragons are very popular with kids, still very popular. How to Train Your Dragon or Sea Beast on Netflix. The general premise is dragons are misunderstood in these shows, and we just need to be friends with them. And what we posit in our film is dragons are bad, and they need to be slayed. And they roam the earth. Now, in our show, it's only a group of little boys who are part of this Dragon Watch, which is this ancient order of knights who can see the dragons. But every time they slay a dragon, they grow in strength. Their weapons get cooler. You might even say they're growing in virtue. That's the type of storytelling that I want for my sons. I want them to see that emulated, and I want them to see that behavior normalized so that they can emulate it, so that it will inspire them in those moments. They might not think back to an episode of Dragon Watch, but all of us at some point, whether it's films or literature, the importance is not just showing that dragons exist, it's making it clear that dragons can be slayed. Because at some point in our lives, we're all going to have to do that.
Yeah, as further evidence that grown men are really just boys in bigger bodies.
This is true.
I'm very much keen on watching Dragon Watch and slaying some dragons.
Fantastic.
This sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool.
So maybe your audience isn't just kids.
This is part of it. Yeah. My boys are just as excited as you are, which is great. If we can go 5 to, I assume you're 45, 43.
Great
5
guess.
to 43.
Yeah, keep going.
That's our demographic. That's our demographic.
You're kind. So let's talk about talent, because in order to do the kinds of films that you're doing, you are recruiting the best in the business.
Absolutely.
What's that like, given that, I mean, your position, as you've explained, is not overtly ideological, philosophical, maybe philosophical in the sense that you're aspiring to the good, the true, and the beautiful, the most important philosophical aspiration. But what's it like? Is it difficult getting the most talented people in Hollywood?
This layers into the opportunity that we're in the middle of right now. If we were a little bit more overtly ideological or trying to tell a specific kind of story, and there's groups that do that, and they do good business. It's a great business in that space. But, and they've freely, you look at groups like the Daily Wire, they're very open where they're like, we have a difficult time attracting talent because we can't give them a career. We can give them a job, but we can't give them a career. And so the opportunity that we have in this moment in time, and really post-pandemic, if you look at our board is made up of the former co-president of Marvel Entertainment. Our board is made up of the former SVP of Marvel Studios. He's quite literally produced 7 of the highest grossing 25 films of all time. We have the co-founder of Walden Media that did all the Narnia films. We have senior executives from Netflix and Pixar. These folks aren't hiding in the shadows anymore. And when we're looking to hire writers, we're having normal negotiations with just about anybody because they go, yeah, this makes sense. And sometimes it might be under a whisper where it's like, I don't know what happened. And these folks aren't necessarily politically aligned, but they're willing to tell these stories. And whether their motivation is purely money or whether their motivation is culture, I would hope that it's somewhere in between. But the talent opportunity now, the biggest challenge we have is actually pipelining talent. Who are those individuals coming out of the University of Dallas, coming out of Hillsdale, coming out of Franciscan, coming out of Wyoming Catholic College, who say, wow, I've always felt like I had a calling to the entertainment industry, but I just don't know how to get there. We don't have the connections. We don't have multiple generations of folks who worked in that industry. So if we can figure that out, then we have an opportunity to change the industry writ large.
What's the timeline on movie production, movie release as we sit here?
So that's one of the opportunities that we have that makes us even more competitive with our studio partners. So if you're looking at a big animated feature film, let's take Disney or Pixar, it's about 4 to 6 years from we're doing this movie to you see it in theaters.
That's remarkable.
And there's a lot of craziness in that 4 to 6 years. So our partners that we work with, we can do it in about 18 months, and we think with some of the technological advancement that we're able to embrace that the studios aren't, we could actually get that down to 12 months. And that's important for us because from a cultural standpoint, I can't make an impact on culture if I do a movie every 10 years, right? And a lot of folks, you see that. You're like, wow, how long did it take you to do this movie? From fundraising to development to production to distribution. Our plan is to do 2 films a year, which is actually double what Pixar usually does. And then from there, actually grow with the releases and the types of content that we're doing. And we're hoping after about a 2.5 year ramp up period, we'll have our first film in theaters and then, start cooking with gas and increase from there.
How does someone in the audience, whether they're a casual observer or someone who might be interested in helping out as an investor, get involved?
Listen, I think reaching out to anybody in your organization to get us connected, we're always looking for great partners, great connections. This is the type of ecosystem that we need to create as a whole, as a movement, and we're definitely going to be carrying the water on our side. I mean, my co-founder, a gentleman named Tim Reckert, a values-aligned individual, Harvard undergrad, was nominated for an Oscar in 2013, and he actually lost to Disney in Best Animated Short, which anytime that chip falls off his shoulder, I pick it up and put it back on. He directed a film called The Star, which has become one of the most beloved Christmas films of all time, a film that my family watches about baker's dozen time over the Christmas break. And so what we're doing is really trying to set up an ecosystem that if investors want to participate on a per film basis or in one of our film funds, they have the ability to do that, and they have the ability to go to bed at night knowing our commitment to our investors, our commitment to culture, and ultimately our commitment to the movement.
Well, if it isn't obvious by having you sit here, and again, thank you for your time on this show, the entire heritage enterprise, the entire heritage orbit, which is to say, most importantly, not me or even my great colleagues, but the hundreds of thousands of people who support us, the 10 million who follow us, we are all behind this. And again, just to be clear, mostly for your purposes, it's not about the ideology. It's about the common sense of the thing.
Absolutely.
It's about you and your colleagues at Sycamore Studios, regardless of their own personal political inclination, saying it's past time for common sense people to be able to have good content to consume for kids.
Amen. Yeah, that's where the bar's set. So I think we can jump over that bar. And then our idea is to keep raising that bar year after year after year, and then eventually become the market leader.
I would be even more excited, Christian, if you were to tell me that you would include the best genre ever, which is the Western.
Amen. Oh, you can say that again.
You're telling me there's a chance?
Oh, there's definitely a chance. There's an animated film called Rango, which is one of my favorite animated films, and it's a Western. It's a mixture of Western and Chinatown, which is one of my favorite films.
Sounds glorious.
It's an outstanding film. And don't you worry about the Western. My family came to Texas in 1836 to run cattle up the Brazos. We're definitely making a kid's Western for sure.
Yeah, that was my last attempt to sort of get you off your game. and once again, you hit the ball out of the park. Well done. Last question for you. We'll have you back over the
fantastic.
years, and anyone associated with Sycamore who'd like to be part of it. You already covered why you're hopeful, and I know that you're hopeful. But speak to, maybe in a storytelling way, someone in the audience who says, "This is great. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, but tomorrow when I wake up, the American dream is slipping away." How do you convince them otherwise?
We've spent a lot of time expressing our priorities through action. And oftentimes that action is reflected with our dollars, right? And when folks in our movement and our value set do that, we win. right? Our actions express priorities. And when we prioritize something as a movement, we generally win. We have not prioritized culture. What we prioritize is complaining about culture, right? I'm as guilty of it as anybody. So if we can stop complaining about culture and actually start creating it, and actually have the opportunity to have our actions express those priorities, we'll do what we always do, which is win. And we'll win the day. And as a person of faith, I'm a person of hope. And I know that with all of the right sort of elements of this perfect storm, from the talent to the moment in time to the economic opportunity, why wouldn't we win, right? I go to bed every night. Someone said, what keeps you up at night? And I said, my 5-year-old mostly. All right, that's about it, that and caffeine. And when I wake up in the morning, I'm generally more hopeful than the day I was before. And if we know we have that with us, and we have a collection of millions of Americans and people around the world who are dedicated to that same cause, why wouldn't we win?
Christian McGuigan, it is always a pleasure to visit with you, to sit with you in person. Thank you for what you're doing with Sycamore Studios. Please thank all of your staff. If you have to, you can tell them it didn't come from me, the President Heritage Foundation. We want y'all to succeed. We're grateful for them. And most of all, thank you for not only having great virtue and witness to the truth, but professional excellence, because that's what it's going to take back the country.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it.
You bet. I hope you enjoyed that give and take, shall I say, with my good friend Christian, and hopefully you follow what they're doing at Sycamore Studios. I'll leave you with this thought. You hear me often close this show by saying that we're winning, to keep your chin up. If this isn't an example that in the least likely of venues that we're taking back this country, I will never convince you that we're winning. But I know you're convinced, so keep your chin up. We are taking back this country. God bless you.
The Kevin Roberts Show is brought to you by more than 500,000 members of the Heritage Foundation. The executive producer is Crystal Kate Bonham. Sound design by Lauren Evans, Mark Guiney, and Tim Kennedy. For more information and to subscribe, please visit heritage.org.